It's in our blood, man. It's in our blood. Nah, just kidding. I think Asian people are really good with money for several reasons: cultural, historical, and just the mindset that Asian people have. Let me explain. So in Asia, money talk is not seen as taboo. Money talk is very transparent. We talk openly about how much money we make, and it's not seen as something awkward or weird if somebody comes up to you and asks, "Hey, how much money do you make at your job?" It's just the most natural thing to us. We know here in America that is socially awkward, right? To just come up to a stranger and ask them how much money they make. That is not the case in China because it's just not seen as taboo. And because of that, the money transparency, there, it's just conversations regarding finances is a lot easier. It's really easy to, like, for example, at your job, see if you're being fairly compensated, if you're being compensated, if you're being undercompensated, whatever the case may be. And it's also easy to talk about how you're saving money, what kind of investments you're making, things like this. Whereas in America, it's very different. Like, it's almost like people want to gatekeep information here, and they don't want to share what they're doing, and they just want to keep their finances locked in, locked tucked away, and just not publicly available. And so that is one major thing. Finances are just openly discussed in China, in Asia. Another thing is that it's just part of our culture. It's like back in the day, there was this philosopher. His name is Confucius, and while he didn't talk directly about money, he talked about things like righteousness and virtue and things like this. And it passed down from parent to kid in many forms. Like, for example, in China, a lot of kids for their birthdays and for holidays, they would get these things called red envelopes. And inside red envelopes was money. That money was considered to be lucky money. You didn't spend it. Like, you don't just go out and buy something with it, you saved it. And so it created this impression in children's mind that that money itself was something valuable and it was something virtuous to hold on to and something to save. And so that reflects in today's society where the savings rate for Chinese people, I read it was like 46%, whereas the savings rate for Americans is less than 5%. That means that for every $100, Chinese people would save $46, and for every $100 that American people would make, they would save only about $5. And that drastic difference, like, reflects kind of like the attitude or the temperament, uh, the temperament difference that Asians have against Americans regarding money. And so, it just compounds. Things compound over time. Like these small differences initially, they start out small, and then over time they get bigger and bigger. Another thing that I can think of is that Chinese people really hate debt. Like, they're very averse to financing things, and they'd much rather just pay in cash in full, like 100%, like right there, bam, like all down. The reason for that is just a cultural aversion to debt. So, for example, in Chinese New Year, one major thing about that is that you should take care of all your debts in that previous year before the Chinese New Year happens. It's seen as like cleaning house. Like, you're starting over, you're starting fresh, you're starting from zero, and you're basically just wiping away all the debt that you've accrued during that year. On the contrary, obviously, in America, people are mired in debt, right? They have credit card debt, they have all kinds of debt, and some people, I mean, there's good ways to use debt too. Like, if you use debt to buy like money producing assets like real estate, that's one way to go. So it's kind of like a double edged sword. Which way's the better way? But that reflects a difference in attitude between Asians and Americans. Asians, we like to pay cash. If there's a way to pay cash and just get it done without and not have any payments, then that's what we'll do. Whereas in America, it's seen as, oh, it's a good thing because you're able to leverage your money, which is true. Like, if you're able to put 20% down and like be able to control the whole asset, then that's seen as a good thing in America. But In reality, it's good and bad because, just like anything, leverage, it's great when it's going up, but it can kill you on the way down as well. But that's one attitude that Asian people have that has made them very successful financially. Just an extreme aversion to debt, and no one ever became broke by paying off their debts. Like it creates a safety net where you take care of all your obligations and you're debt free. You stay above water a lot easier that way. It's so ingrained, money culture is so ingrained in Asian society that, like, for example, Ronnie Chieng, the comedian on Netflix, he has this really cool line that says, during Chinese New Year we have this phrase "gong hei fat choi." It's what we say to each other, and it's how we greet each other during Chinese New Year. Do you know what "gong hei fat choi" means? It means hope you get rich. It's not Happy New Year or hope things are well. It's hope you get rich. That's how ingrained money culture is in our society. We kind of obsess over it. And why is that? Well, part of it is due to the history of China, too. So, back in the day, like in the 1960s, in order to get out of Maoism and like into the modern society, China adopted this economic policy where they wanted to spur the economy and change it from like a rural country into a more prosperous and urban country. And so they encouraged business development. They encouraged, um, you know, economic pursuits. They encouraged making money, saving it, and investing it very, very aggressively. And as a result of this, a lot of people in one generation, they went from being poor farmers to being extremely rich businessmen. And that's how they measured their status. Another kind of social quirk during the China's history was something called the one child policy. So I forgot what year that was implemented, but basically it meant that every family could only have one child. This was meant to kind of curb the population growth because it was just getting out of control. So only one child per household, unless you had like twins, which would be okay. But if you had like a second child, you would have to pay a huge, huge fine that kind of discouraged having a second child. The reason why this led to kind of a fixation was money was the following. So, because families could only have one child, they preferred males over females. That was because of several reasons. Males could, like, inherit property, they can take over businesses. And back in the day, they were like seen as more valuable because they could do more physical labor in farms and such things. And so families preferred boys over girls. And as a result, there was like a lot of gender specific abortions, and that led to a skew in the demographics. So at its worst, like there was 120 men for every 100 females. And so that means that a large number of men were competing to woo just a limited number of females. And how did they do that? How did the men try to stand out? Basically by their status, by how much money they made. And so this created a very money focused culture. And that is what you needed to be able to be successful in the romance world. In order to woo a woman and be able to start a family, you needed to have money. So that's what it simply came down to. And that's why Chinese, Asian people are very, very obsessed with making money. Another reason why Asians are so good with making with money is just because of their frugal nature. There's such a thing as the 10-to-1 rule. So that means for every $10, people try to only spend $1. In reality, you probably couldn't do that because, like, just the realities of modern society, you couldn't just spend 10% of your income. I mean, that would be like living way too low. But nevertheless, it still got you to like the saving money mentality. That's where even though you couldn't save, you know, $9, you could at least save, I don't know, like $4 or $5. And it was like the old saying, shoot for the moon and you'll end up in the stars or something like that. Even though you couldn't reach the 10% burn rate, it was still much better than the person who didn't have that framework for saving money. Another reason why I think people or Asian people are really, really good at money was just because it was encouraged or it was looked upon to go after careers that were high paying. So doctors, lawyers, bankers, engineers, things like this. That's why you see a lot of Asian people as physicians, as healthcare providers, as in finance. Anything that's high paying was viewed favorably because Asian parents wanted their children to be financially secure, and one way to do that was basically by accepting these high paying jobs. Another reason that just popped into my mind was something called uh, the three generation household that Asian culture has adopted. The three generation household. So, what does that mean? That means grandma's living with you, your parents are living with you, and you're living with your parents. So, three generations. And what does that do? That helps the younger people, number one, save money because uh, they're not just kicked out when the second that they turn 18. Like they're able to live with their parents, they're able to save up their money, they don't have to spend money on paying rent, they don't have to get a job in order to pay that rent. They can slowly like hoard up their savings so that when the time comes, they're able to put a down payment on their own house, for example. That's what gives like Asian children kind of like a leg up in society that we're able to afford our house because we were living with our parents and it was not seen as taboo, whereas in America it is seen as taboo to live with your parents. To in America, if you're like 25 or something like that and you're living with your parents, is viewed as something like you failed in life or something like that. But in Asian culture, that is the norm. Like we want parents want their kids to be set up and at a good stage in life before they jump out on their own. Whereas it seems like in America, it's the opposite. It's like, okay, you're 18 now, you get pushed out. And so you got to figure it out on your own. In Asia, you have more of a foundation and then you can enter modern society. The other thing about the three generation household is that you can save a lot of money on elderly care. So three generations, that means grandma is living with parent and also with grandchildren, right? That means that elderly care is taken care of. Like you don't need to spend money on a nursing home. You don't need to spend money on like elderly care in senior facilities, things like this. No, it was like the son's or the daughter's duty to take care of their parents as they get older. This is just Asian culture. And so we didn't have to incur the costs of those really, really significant expenses of taking care of our parents as they aged. Just stayed at home with us. Whereas in America, like it's seen as the norm to kind of stick your parents in nursing homes when they get older, right? Like just let the doctors take care of your parents as they age. And so that would be horrifying to a lot of Asian families. That is seen as like some kind of barbaric practice where like we would never do that. Like the thought of doing that is absurd. Like, and so because of that mentality, we're able to avoid the cost of elderly care. And the final reason that Asian people are so good with money and it seems like they have so much more money is because they simply worked their asses off. Like there's in Asia, there's this concept. It's called 996, which means from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. That's how much you worked. There's been a lot of recent pushback regarding this because it's just causing a lot of burnout, and a lot of like resentment at work. But nevertheless, that's the culture. It's the idea of like hard work, and well, guess what happens when you work more hours at work? You make more money, right? So it's common sense. Like that culture is kind of ingrained in us, that hardworking, like just plow through it, just work your ass off type mentality. 996, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. If you're doing any math, that's 12 hours a day, and that is 72 hours a week. Personally, I don't think that's healthy. I think you need a balance, but nevertheless, I'm just explaining why like Asian people seem to have much more money than the average person. You know, do I agree with all these like ideas that Asian people have? Yes or no? Like there's pros and cons to everything, but overall, that is the ideas, or I hope I've encapsulated the ideas of like what Asians prioritize. And maybe there's some takeaways to learn from the Asian population regarding money so that you can better your own life financially. All right, guys, thanks for listening. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.